What's up guys, Chris here from Gemini K9. Today we're going to be talking about timing during dog training. That's part of our Training Itinerary series, so stay tuned for more exciting videos. With today's topic, timing, it is critical to have really good timing in the way of the delivery of the rewards or of the corrections when we're working with our dogs. All too often we found that handlers, or just especially the new handlers, they're a little bit slower in the delivery of the rewards or the correction, and that can instill confusion or conflict in your dog. And so we spend a great deal of time talking about and showing them how to deliver these things on time, pardon the pun. With that said, on average, you're looking at about 1.3 seconds you have in order to deliver those rewards for the dog to be able to put it together, or vice versa with the corrections. Timing is, great timing is the difference between a mediocre handler and some of the world-class handlers. That's all it really is coming down to being able to reinforce on time. With that said, we find that timing and shaping, they work together. When we say shaping, that's basically raising the criteria. And when I say raising the criteria, if let's say, for example, we're teaching the dog to sit. Ultimately, we want the dog to sit fast. So what would happen now, we would actually pair the command with maybe, let's say, a light correction in order to create what we call escape training, where the dog would work to escape pressure. Now, it's very important that the timing is on point. So an example of, let's say, poor timing, let's say we're teaching the dog the simple sit. So now we say to the dog, sit, the dog sits. As we go to get our treat out of our pocket, the dog stands up and we reward the dog. That would be a simple example of poor timing. We would ideally want to reinforce the dog while the bum is still on the ground, not while it's standing. And so now this leads me into the whole marker system, where the marker allows you to reinforce that behavior on time and allows you time to go into your pocket and deliver the reward. So again, we tell the dog sit, the dog sits, we mark it, or if you're working with a clicker, click. Then we go into the pocket and reward the dog. Now this is provided the dog knows what the marker means. So this is something that you would have to teach the dog separately. But again, it comes back to timing. That's the beauty of the marker system. It allows you to mark the behavior on time. Whereas if we're using, again, more in the way of traditional good boy, good girl, sometimes we're a little bit slower with that. And so now it's called a delayed reward, which means now it can still instill a certain amount of confusion in the dog. Doesn't mean the dog cannot learn it, but we just find that with great timing, it makes for efficient learning. Now, let's say we're doing distance work. So, for example, in the sport of IGP, which I compete in, what happens is we have what we call the long down. So with the long down, the dog would be placed on a down with the handler X amount of paces away from the dog with his or her back turned to the dog. The dog must not move out of position. Now, it can be very hard if you're using traditional training techniques to be able to get that correction in on time at a distance. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll employ the use of a spotter or an assistant who would, let's say, be on a long line placed behind the dog while we are away from the dog with our back towards the dog. Now, if the dog was to shift or come out of position, that spotter would deliver a light correction on the line to remind the dog that it has to stay steady in position. So now the correction comes quickly, and I don't have to do anything as a handler. If anything, when I come back to the dog, it's all pleasantries, whether it be its ball, its tug, or a food reward. But the beauty of it is the timing comes immediately. So this is where now we would again utilize a spotter under those circumstances to be able to get across our reinforcer a lot quicker. Even with the heel exercise, where some handlers are teaching their dog the watch command, or again for, let's say, IGP sport competition where the dog is learning to heel with its head up, we find that sometimes handlers are off off with their timing when it comes time to reinforce the dog. So for example, if it's a young dog now learning to keep focus on the handler while in transit, what will happen is sometimes the dog is looking up and the handler is so concerned about looking forward and keeping a particular type of posture that they're missing an opportune time to reinforce the dog for proper behavior. Or vice versa, for the dog that drops focus, that handler, because they're not paying attention to the dog during training, they lose an opportunity to correct the dog for the loss of focus. So again, that delayed correction, which equals poor timing. So once again, in training, we tend to look at the dog. Eventually, going back to the use of the spotter can be off to the side while you're healing the dog, and the spotter would say either yay or nay if the dog didn't give the particular behavior. If it's a yay and it's a fairly new dog, the handler would mark it and then reward the dog, even in transit. Or if it's a little bit more advanced, the spotter would say nay, and then the handler would correct the dog at that point in time. And even with a correction, you can utilize a marker in the way of a negative marker. So it could be 9 and a light pop, the dog looks back up, we mark and reinforce the behavior. But in either case, it's all about knowing or being observant to the dog's behavior. And so we find that some people do not pay attention to their dog during training, and so they lose opportune times to reinforce behavior. We have certain tools that we can use, like the e-collar, which allows us to correct on time. It's very consistent regardless as to the level that we set it at. And the beauty of it is for distance work, once again, we can get the correction to the dog immediately. That's the beauty of the e-collar. But again, handler beware. We have to exercise discretion when using these collars because we can create what we call superstitious behavior. But like I said, once used properly, it's one of the better tools out there for developing great performance. Remember guys, the stuff that I talked about today in the video is not only applicable to the sport dog enthusiast, but also to the pet dog owner. Perfect timing is critical for the, let's say, the efficient learning process of your dog. So keep in mind, when you're working with your dog, rewards and corrections, have them come on time if you want your dog to excel really quick. With that said, we're nearing the end of the video. Stay tuned for our next video on the use of punishment in training as part of our Training Itinerary program. Take care guys. If you like the video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. And at the same time, please subscribe to our channel.